Hey guys, Kep here. Today I wanted to talk about the OnePlus 9 and how it fares in 2023. I got this phone for $300 new on Amazon about a year ago, and I've been using it as my daily phone ever since then. I think this one's probably the best deal you can get for a new phone for $300. Right now I'm making this review because I broke the back glass on my OnePlus, and T-Mobile had a deal where I could trade in my OnePlus for a free Pixel 7. So I pretty much had to take advantage of that deal. Anyways, let's get back to the OnePlus, starting with the review. We'll talk first about performance, which is where I think that this phone really shines. It comes with a Snapdragon 888 and 8 to 12 gigs of RAM. I got the 8 gig version. It's slightly cheaper and figured it was plenty for me. And I was right. With 8 gigs, it's still an absolute beast. Which is no surprise, because OnePlus is really known for tweaking their phones to take full advantage of the hardware that they ship with. The Snapdragon 888 allows this phone to chew through pretty much any tasks I threw at it. It easily plays Genshin Impact with buttery smooth gameplay and, handles multitasking and web browsing and all the stuff that, you need to do on a phone very well. The chipset is also fantastic at handling connection while you're out and about. Obviously, your mileage might vary depending on your provider and location. For me, I use T-Mobile, and everywhere that I've gone, I've had really good service, including abroad. I went to Mexico and I still had full coverage. On the Wi-Fi front, I can get max speeds out of my router, which uses Wi-Fi 6. It makes it so when you download apps or browse the web or make video calls, it's really fast. Although the Wi-Fi can't fix the lacking cameras when it comes to the video calls. I'll get into that later on when we talk about the camera. Anyways, since you can pick up this phone around $300 new right now, I would like to compare it to other phones around this price point. I've used several, and a lot of them seem to really struggle when switching from application to application. Likely because a lot more of the budget-oriented phones lack the necessary RAM to keep so many apps in memory, which is one reason that I would really recommend this phone if you're on a tight budget and you insist on getting a new device. However, all of the speed in the world can't fix some of the issues that I have with this phone's software. It's running Oxygen OS, and honestly I'm torn on it. I enjoy the look and feel when I'm browsing around, and I love the customizability. Like, for example, my favorite part of the software is essentially being able to tweak the status bar and the icons that are in that status bar without having to have a custom ROM or without having to root your phone. However, there's a lot more things that I dislike about the software than I like. The prime example that I can think of is essentially when you get a notification, they make it unnecessarily hard to dismiss. You have to swipe all the way from left to right to delete it, or hit this little trash can when swiping right. Another thing that drives me crazy is that gestures will randomly just stop working below the top half of the screen. So if you're swiping from the left side of the screen to try and go back, a lot of times it just won't work. And this happens enough that I find myself restarting my device a couple of times a week due to this. I also find that my screen will become unresponsive just out of the blue, and it will require me to turn the screen off and back on again before I'm able to actually interact with anything, which again is just something that seems to happen primarily on this phone. I haven't experienced that with any of my other Android phones. So yeah, it just seems like overall the software is still not great. And on a positive note, one thing that I have come to appreciate about this phone is the community seems to be fairly active on XDA. So if you get an unlocked phone like I did, it's trivial to root it and load custom ROMs. It also leaves me to believe that it will get support long after OnePlus has stopped delivering their promised updates. I myself am running a rooted stock image and have been loving it since it allows me to force a global black mode using an app called Repainted. All right, let's move on from the software and talk a little bit about the physical appeal of this device. I got the Stellar Black version and have found that it's really nice to look at, if not a little bit boring, and it's an absolute magnet for fingerprints. That's my biggest complaint about the black version of the phone. The front and back of the phone are made of Gorilla Glass 5, giving it a nice scratch and shatter resistance, and the frame is made out of plastic. The plastic frame does a convincing job of feeling like metal, but it does mean that you'll still sacrifice some durability. My phone fell very shortly out of my pocket while I was mowing the lawn, and it shattered the back. So I imagine if it had a metal frame, that likely wouldn't have happened because it did shatter where the plastic kind of broke. Anyways, the in-hand feel of this phone is pretty close to the best I've ever felt. The back curves slightly towards the front of the device, which makes it nestle really nicely into your hand. It almost feels like you're gripping it even when it's just resting in your hand and you're not really exerting any effort. The curves also make it feel a lot smaller in your hand, which I prefer to the boxy trend that a lot of phones are moving towards these days. And the screen's flat, which I know myself and a lot of other people really enjoy because it makes the gestures really easy to use and it prevents misclicks when holding the phone and watching a video or, doing any number of things. The phone is also lighter than other phones I've used. I assume this is in part because of the plastic rails, which helps make the phone feel better in the hand. A cool hardware feature that this phone has is an alert slider, which allows you to quickly switch between vibrate, ring, and silent modes. The slider has a very satisfying click and also, for me, kind of functions as a little fidget toy. So great for those of you who like to fidget. Although I've actually missed a decent amount of calls because I accidentally silenced the phone just subconsciously playing with it or just pulling it out or putting it into my pocket. So if you easily lose focus and you need to be reachable, it might not be the best phone for you. I would say you could disable it through settings, but I searched and I just couldn't find anything that worked on modern phones. Another thing that sets this phone apart from the budget phones around this price is its haptics. They're great. They're not the best. Like the Pixels are better. Obviously iPhones are better. Samsungs are better, but they're very nice. So they're snappy and they give you a good sense of feedback when you're clicking away, which is really all you need. And they're plenty strong for feeling a phone call or a text while it's in your pocket. The screen on the OnePlus 9 is a 120Hz OLED screen, and it's probably my favorite aspect of this phone. It doesn't have a variable refresh rate beyond manually setting it between 60, 90, and 120, but that's not really variable, but at least you have some options, if you want to make the battery last a little longer. The display gets pretty bright. It's plenty viewable outdoors. And the screen looks fantastic and has my preferred corner notch cut out. I don't really like the ones that are a centered hole punch like on the Samsungs. It's also worth noting that the phone comes out of the box with a screen protector pre-applied, which will save you from some scratches early on and keep your phone looking pristine for a little longer. My second favorite part of this phone is probably the stereo speakers. They are really good. There's one in the earpiece and then there's one just on the bottom, a full-on speaker. There's not much to say outside of that they sound loud and full. So these speakers not only blow away the budget phones, but I would say they're better than the speakers even on the Samsung flagships that I've had, which have been the S22 and the S22 Plus, as well as the 21 series. I've never had an Ultra though, so the Ultra probably has better speakers. My wife has an iPhone 14, and I would say they're about on par with that. Honestly, the OnePlus is probably a little bit better, but pretty close to the iPhone 14. At any rate, here's an audio sample of some nice copyright-free music. Okay, back to the review. Let's talk about the battery. This phone comes with a 4500 milliamp hour battery, which is smaller than a lot of the 5000 milliamp hour phones that I've used in the past and that you'd probably get at this price range. Usually budget phones have pretty big batteries. That doesn't necessarily mean the battery is bad though. I found that I can get about 8 hours of screen on time based on AccuBattery. If you haven't used that app, I'd highly recommend it. Which means I can easily make it through a day, with 8 hours of screen on time. If I charge to 100%, by the time I go to the bed, I'm usually in the mid to high 20s during a normal work day. Based on my testing, I usually honestly only allow my battery to go from 20 to 80% for longevity. But, for these reviews, every once in a while, I will let it fully charge and discharge. Anyways, the longevity of the battery isn't what is really important to me with this phone. That honor belongs to the crazy fast 65-watt charger that's included in the box. For us in the States, this is pretty close to as fast as we're going to be able to get. I'm able to get a full charge in about 30 minutes from dead. I'm pretty strict about keeping my battery between 20 and 80% though, like I said, so most days I just plug it in for 5 minutes here, maybe 10 minutes there, and find that I'm always at around 80% charged. This phone does support fast wireless charging at 15 watts, but once you've tried the cable charging, wireless charging just isn't as fun, so I didn't use it. All right, the final point of this review is the camera, and sadly, I think it's pretty mediocre. There's 4 cameras on this phone. From the front, there's a 16 megapixel selfie camera. On the back, there's a 48 megapixel main camera, a 50 megapixel ultra wide, and a useless third camera that just takes low-res black and white pictures. It's their monochrome sensor. There are so many reviews that just praise this phone's camera and its partnership with Hasselblad, but personally, I think the camera's pretty bad, considering the initial MSRP of this phone. If subjects are moving, it pretty much always results in blurry photos. Even when your subjects are still, there's still something that just looks wrong in the pictures when compared to real life. They look like they have a filter applied to them, but almost like an inconsistent filter. So yeah, it's just like certain parts of my dog, for example, will look blurry and kind of patched together, whereas other parts look completely fine. So it's really strange. And then also every lens that I've used seems to have some sort of like purple hue sometimes on the edges. So I don't know how to get rid of that. Yeah, but the ultra wide is probably my favorite part of the camera system on this phone. I usually prefer telephotos and honestly still do, but this ultra wide provides better photos than pretty much any ultra wide camera that I've used personally. And it's significantly better at macro shots than any macro camera that I've used to date. More companies need to copy this ultra wide macro camera setup because it provides some really cool shots when you have an ultra wide with autofocus. Another issue that I have with this phone's camera setup is the lack of OIS, optical image stabilization. I will say though, it has really strong electronic image stabilization. It crops in a decent bit to get this, but if you are taking a video, it will look pretty steady because of that EIS. While the video is awful in my opinion, and the photos in normal daytime seem to be a little artificial to me, I will say that the night photos on this phone are pretty decent. They bring out a lot of the details that would have been missed on some of the other phones that I've tried in the past. And overall, I may not like the camera system that much, but if you are buying a budget phone around this price, other than like a Pixel 6a, you know, you could get those new for under $300. This will be a pretty good contender. All right, as a final verdict, I'm just going to go through some pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. At $300 for a new phone, I think that this is an absolutely killer deal. It's got the super snappy Snapdragon 888, pun intended. It's got 8 gigabytes of RAM minimum, which provides plenty of space for multitasking and gaming. The build quality is really nice, if a little cheap with the plastic rail, but again, $300, you're going to be getting much worse built phones new typically than this. The screen is absolutely fantastic. Definitely going to be better than anything that you get at this price point. The alert slider is a good pro. Again, might be a con though if like me you're a little fidgety and you need to be reachable. Oxygen OS allowing the status bar customizations I think is a big plus, and I'm sure there's a lot of other customizations that people would love. Again, put them in the comments if you use Oxygen OS and you know you've got something that I might not know. A huge plus is the insane charging speed. It's got decent battery life. It's got the best stereo speakers that I've ever had on one of my phones. It's got pretty decent night shots, and it's got a really snappy in-screen fingerprint sensor. The charger comes in the box with a pre-applied screen protector, and the haptics are really nice. So that's the list of the pros. Let's talk a little bit about the cons. Camera has no OIS, and it's got poor color reproduction and high levels of blurriness. But again, for $300, if you're not going with a Pixel, you're probably not going to get a phone that has this good of a camera, so you might even move that over into a Pro if you're on this tight of a budget. The other cons are the software occasionally just freezes and you're unable to interact with it. The gestures also occasionally stop working and require a full restart. And the black model is a fingerprint magnet. So overall, I think the pros far outweigh the cons for this phone. The only reason I'm getting rid of it is because I had a free trade-in through T-Mobile, and with a cracked back of the screen, I don't think the resale value for my particular model would be very high. That wraps up my review. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, please drop a like and subscribe. If you'd like me to check out a different phone or a piece of tech, leave a comment. If you disagree with anything I said, please feel free to leave a comment or a dislike on the video. Anyways, this has been Kep. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope you stay techie.